Hello, Blend members. Welcome back to the Blend Book Club. I'm Julia Belle, and today I am so excited. I'm trying to contain it because I am chatting to the best-selling author, serial entrepreneur, executive coach, and frankly, iconic public speaker, Laura Gassner Otting. Via her talks, her TV appearances, and best-selling book, Limitless, she has become a globally renowned force for driving teams towards fearless success mindsets. But she also talks about the paradox that comes with success and how it can sometimes bring on feelings of confusion or maybe even it feeling underwhelming or empty. Her TED Talk, titled Why Doesn't Success Bring Happiness?, stands at 1.8 million views at the time of recording this conversation. And that is the topic that brought me to her. I read and covered her best-selling book, Wonderhell, for the Blend Book Club. You might remember I recorded it back in early 2024. And Laura found a way of putting into words feelings and experiences that really nobody else has before. So with that, I'm delighted to have her with me to talk about that and lots more. Laura, thank you so much. Great to see you.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Of course. So can I jump in by talking about Limitless first of all? It has been extraordinarily successful. It's about leaders getting unstuck and achieving big results. So clearly there is a big appetite for that conversation and for that learning. Why then does this happen? Why do leaders get stuck? And what are the symptoms of it in your view?
Sure. So I should preface this by saying that I spent 20 years in executive search. So it was my job to fill C-suite positions in organizations that weave the civic infrastructure of our globe. And it was my job to call the most successful people, right? My clients hired me to go search and recruit away on their behalf the most successful people in the world. And so that's what I did. And I was astounded by the fact that I was calling all of these people because they were super successful. But despite all that success, again, which is why I was calling them, they weren't very happy. So they all called me back. And I kept coming back to this question over and over and over about like, well, if everything on paper is perfect, right? You've got the big job, you've got the big title, you've got the right spouse and the right house and the right clothes and exactly the right size, right? Why doesn't it feel right? Like, why are all the boxes on the list full and we still feel so empty? And what I came to understand from the handful of people I wasn't able to recruit away, as well as looking at my own life and the choices that I made at different times, that when we fill everyone else's boxes on everyone else's definition of everyone else's idea of success, we're left empty because we're actually not fulfilling our own. And what I realized is that it's not success as externally defined that we need to be hunting down, but in fact, consonance, this thing that gives us alignment and flow, when we can bring the very best of who we are to every single thing we do, and also giving ourselves the grace to allow that to change throughout our lives. Because the person you were when you were 15, 16, 17 years old, deciding your university, your major, your career, it's not the same person you are at 26 and 36 and 46 and 56. And so we get this one definition handed to us at some point by a high school counselor or a parent or a celebrity, and we're like, okay. And then we think that's the definition. And then we never question it, and B, we never go back and allow ourselves to change it. And so of course we get to this point where everything is full and we feel empty.
So is your point that we should constantly be redefining success? It could move at any time and you need to be aligned with that or at least aware of it.
Absolutely. The worst question, when Limitless came out, I did like 150 podcasts, and the worst question I got asked in probably 145 of them was, what advice would you give your 22-year-old self? And I was like, my 22-year-old self, first of all, wouldn't listen to the 53-year-old me. She'd be like, who are you, old fart? And why are you wearing old lady jeans, right? Like, she would not listen to me, number one. And number two, even if I did know who I was at 22, I mean, I was like, what advice would I give my 22-year-old self who's listening to a podcast over the internet that she downloaded onto her mobile phone? Like, none of those things even existed when I was 22. So even if I knew myself, the world around me changed. So even if you know yourself, the world around you changes constantly. So who you are and what you care about vis-a-vis the people in your life, the causes in your life, the opportunities available to you will constantly change. So if we don't go back and continue to ask ourselves, does this actually matter to me? Do I actually want to bring my best self to this thing? Why do I care about this? And what will success in this get me? So a lot of times, when I ran my executive search firm, I remember we would have types of clients come to us, and my business partner would be like, we've never done work in that vertical before. We've never done those types of jobs before. And I'm like, those are awful and horrible. And the people involved in them are going to be really needy clients who want to, to cut our rates and want to like doing a really good job with those clients only gets us more of them. So why would we want that? So constantly asking yourself, what does success in this thing get me? Does it get me more of the thing I want? Or does it actually get me less of the thing I want? I think it's really important for us to constantly go back and keep doing pretty much on an annual basis.
Yeah, is what I'm pushing my whole life towards a, utopia designed by somebody else? And have I just not even noticed it? Have I gone my whole life without even noticing it? One of the other themes, though, that you talk about, that even if you do kind of play by your playbook, Laura, where it's, I'm actually just going to listen to myself where I am in this present moment and push for what makes sense for me, you can still get this phenomenon, imposter syndrome, which we're hosting an event over at Blend with our executive community. And this has been the most popular event for people to sign up to. So clearly, even executives at the very top C-suite levels deal with this phenomenon. Why do you think that comes in, even if you are pursuing the very thing that you're made to do and that makes you happy? And what kind of advice do you give leaders that you work with who are dealing with that phenomenon?
Okay, so I love this topic. I love this topic dearly. I literally gave a keynote at Google yesterday morning on this topic. And these are people who have worked their whole lives to get to Google, to get to this job that they thought would be amazing. And there was a woman who was in the audience, and during the Q&A time, she raised her hand, and she, she's probably like in her mid 50s. And so, she's been around, she runs some important stuff at Google. She's made it. And she was like, I have a question about imposter syndrome. I'm like, I got this email a week ago inviting me to be on a panel, and the other panelists are like the senior vice president of this big company and the senior vice president of that big company. And I didn't respond to it because I don't know why they asked me. And I feel like maybe I'm not their peer. And I don't feel comfortable saying yes. I don't feel good enough for it. So I just haven't responded. And I said, have you been to this event before? And she said, yes. And I said, have you respected the panels they've put together before? And she said, yes. And I said, and do you respect the people who are putting the panel together this year? And she said, yes. And I said, then why wouldn't you respect the fact that they know you and they see you and they invited you to be on their panel? And she was like, well, okay. And I'm like, okay, let me ask you a question another way. Are you a subject matter area expert? And she said, yes. And I said, and is the senior vice president of this thing and that thing, are they subject matter area experts? And she said, yes. And I'm like, so that sounds a lot like your peers. Even if you're not a subject matter expert, even if you're not a senior vice president, even by title, even by gender, you are not a peer of theirs. If you're a subject matter expert in what you bring to the table, and they're a subject matter expert in what they bring to the table, and so because of that, you're on this panel to be subject matter experts, it sounds like your peers. And literally, like, we're doing this Q&A in this big auditorium, and I was like, I need you to email me tomorrow and tell me that you responded to that email and said yes. And everyone's cheering in the room, and it's great. So here's the thing. When Limitless came out, and all of a sudden, it debuted at number 2 on the Washington Post bestseller list. And I was so exhausted from the 150 podcasts and all the work that it took to get the book out that, like, I left my humility, like, somewhere, like, in the waiting room of one of the airplane lounges that I'd been traveling to do all these keynotes to launch the book. It's an exhausting process. And my publisher texted me and he's like, your book just debuted, and right behind Michelle Obama at number 2. And I was like, number 2? How do you get to be number 1? And suddenly I had this hunger that I didn't even know existed. I didn't even know my book could be a bestseller,
You
let
were
alone number 2 behind
unsatisfied
Michelle
with
Obama.
being behind Michelle.
I was like, right. I mean, like, I got like 9 million books I need to sell to catch up to her. But like, there was just that moment where I was like, someone's got to be number 1. Oh,
right.
Interesting, right? Like, if I didn't even know I could do this, it's amazing, it's exciting, it's wonderful. And also in that moment, I was like, I peeked through the doors of what could be, and I was like, what else is out there? And then I was filled with anxiety and uncertainty and doubt and exhaustion and envy and burnout and also imposter syndrome. Like, am I even allowed to have this bigger goal? So suddenly it was wonderful, but it was also hell. It's a space I call Wonderhell. And Wonderhell is the space where the burden of potential walks in, unpacks its backpack, and is like, hey, kid, what else have you got for me today? And that's when you decide what you really care about. And what I realized in that moment was my potential was saying, you could do more. You could be better. You're not going to be Michelle Obama, but you made the Washington Post list. What about the Wall Street Journal, right? Like there was just like other things out there. And if I didn't care about the other things, this isn't a bigger, better, faster, more. This is a like, oh, that's actually kind of interesting to me. I want to go that direction. And I started to get compelled in that way. And then as soon as you walk into the rooms you've never been allowed to be in before, never thought were available to you, the crushing imposter syndrome hits. And so I interviewed 100 different glass ceiling shatterers, Olympic medalists, startup unicorns, philanthropists, activists, creatives, everyday people like you and I. And I was like, how do you get out of this? How do I get out of imposter syndrome? And then I learned what was the most devastating and the most liberating thing ever is that you never actually get out. You don't get out of imposter syndrome. The people I talk to literally starting their second billion-dollar company or at the top of a ski mountain with a gold medal in their pocket, about to go down the next gold medal run thinking they're going to find out I'm a fraud, right? You don't get out of it. And I started to think about the term imposter. There's something, you don't belong here, you should leave.
Fraud,
or syndrome. Yeah, syndrome. You're sick, maybe you should lay down. And imposter syndrome is handed to us like it's a diagnosis. That we think there's something wrong with us. But the people that I spoke to who did well, instead of saying, I haven't done this before, simply did like the most basic thing in the entire world. This is like not even genius level hack. This is just like, it's so simple. It's not, I haven't done this before. They went, wow, I haven't done this before. And they looked through those doors and they went, how exciting, what an adventure. I get to learn. And when you tell yourself I get to learn, it means I also get to fail. I get to experiment. I don't have to be perfect, right? It's not, I haven't done this before. I haven't done this before. And they saw imposter syndrome not as a diagnosis, but actually as a badge of honor. It wasn't a limitation. It was an invitation to everything else that was possible. And so they were able to use it to energize themselves as opposed to imprison themselves.
It's fascinating to hear that, and comforting that even people at the very, very top, frankly, of the world still feel it. What's your advice
especially people at the very top, especially people, because they're the ones who keep pushing. Like they look forward to imposter syndrome because it tells them that they got to somewhere they didn't even know they could get to.
Okay. What's your advice about the transparency with it? Because it's a balance. These days, there's a lot of rhetoric around vulnerability and transparency, particularly if you're a leader leading a team down a new path, pioneering. But at the same time, I have to be honest, if I'm being led by someone, I don't necessarily want them to say, I'm so nervous. I'm absolutely terrified. I have no idea what I'm doing. What's your advice when it comes to leaders who come to you with this syndrome or with this phenomenon, and how they communicate that to their teams to inspire confidence, but also to remain human?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's a lot of science that shows, public speaking is people's number one fear in the world, right? It's like public speaking, number one, death, number two, right? People would rather die than get on a stage and speak. And the first time I went to give a talk, like I gave a TedX talk in 2016. It was the first talk I ever gave in my entire life. 2,000 people in the beautiful Boston Opera House. I didn't know if lunch was going to come out at the top or the bottom, but I was like scared out of my mind. And the woman who was coaching me for it, she said, "How are you feeling?" And I'm like, "I am nervous." And she said, "Well, how does that feel in your body?" And I'm like, "Well, my heart is accelerating. My stomach has flutters. I can't seem to concentrate on one specific thing." And she said, "Okay." She said, "Tell me about the last time you were excited about something." And I told her about that. And she goes, had that feel in your body? And I was like, "Well, actually, my heart rate was accelerated and my stomach was fluttering and I couldn't concentrate." And she said, "Excitement and fear feel exactly the same. It's just the decision of what we say to ourselves about it." So there's science that shows that if you say not, "I'm so scared" or "I'm so nervous," but "I'm so excited," that your body actually goes, "Oh, okay, cool. We're not in trouble. This is actually good feeling. This is motivating. This is energizing," as opposed to like fight or flight, stop, run, don't do it. So it completely changes how our brain reacts if we just say the words a little differently. Again, it's not, "I haven't done this before. I haven't done this before." It's not that I'm scared, I'm excited. And so what I tell the executives that I coach that they should, first of all, change the way that they're interpreting that, because look, your staff can smell fear, right? They're like, they can tell when you're scared, and they lose trust. And that's number one. Number two, our company has done a global survey. We started since January 2019, where we have nearly 10,000 responses from 74 different countries across every possible demographic and every possible industry, that about what actually engages people in work and in life. And it's very obvious that bad leaders bleed out good people. So we focused our research specifically on people say, I work for a quote unquote good leader. A good leader is somebody who gets great results. They've done the training, right? They're well respected. And what people told us is if they work for a quote unquote good leader, but they have no relationship with that leader, they are just as likely to leave the job as if they work for a bad leader. So that vulnerability, that relationship actually really matters. Okay, so number three, the thing to do then is to not say, I'm so scared, I have no idea what I'm doing, but like, I'm excited. There's a lot that we know. There's some things we don't know, and we're going to get through it together. I'm counting on you to come into my office or to stop me and say, I think that's not the right direction. I have a better idea. We're going to get through this together. There are things that I know, there are things that I'm going to be certain about, but in the areas where I'm not, I want to make sure that you've got eyes and ears open also, because I know that together we can make this really rock.
And I suppose the learning there would be, you have to have this inner dialogue with yourself, like you said there about comparing fear and excitement. If you do that on yourself first and then you project out to the team after doing that work, then hopefully it'll come out right rather than just sort of spreading fear.
Exactly. And so you start with what you know, right? These are the things that I know. So there are transferable skills and there are translatable skills. A transferable skill is we are launching a new product, right? And I've launched a product at this company and that company and that company. So I can just take it and I can just run the same playbook. That's completely transferable. You transfer from one place to the other. Then there's translatable skills, which is we're not launching a product, but maybe we're trying to launch an idea or create a movement or get people to do things, right? How do we do that? Well, there's some things that I can translate, like you got to have good messaging. You got to figure out your target market. You've got to figure out a times plan. You've got to figure out what's the order of operations? What's the team that you need to assemble? So you start with what you know. So even if you're like, I'm an imposter, I've never done this before, you've actually done some things before, right? You've done some things. So what have you done that actually allows you to be certain that when you are faced with a decision tree, you know what decisions to make. You're taking some data, you're taking life experiences, you're taking those translatable skills when you don't have directly transferable skills. But we don't walk into a brand new product or a brand new promotion or a brand new possibility like straight out of the womb, right? We're all bringing something to the table. And by the way, the things you bring to the table may be from your paid work, but they also may be from being a parent. They may be being a volunteer at your place of worship. They may be any other place where you've gathered experience and expertise and knowledge and network. All of that stuff counts.
And like you said to the attendee at your event at Google, there's a reason that you've been put here. And so if you decide that you're an imposter and that you don't deserve to be there, are you kind of disrespecting those who put you there that know you can do it, or else they wouldn't have bothered? So I think that's a really nice mindset shift, to be honest.
Absolutely.
At our events, we recently have been exploring the different challenges that millennials and Gen Z talent face now compared to how things were for older generations who were building their success in the 80s and 90s. Challenging for both, but different, and undeniably so. So when it comes to your areas of expertise, where you talk about Wonderhell, where you talk about needing to connect, but not to instill fear, and you talk about vulnerability and so on, how are you looking at the future of leadership? Do you perceive a difference in attitude or struggle or a different approach needed to handle tomorrow's landscape for tomorrow's leaders?
Yeah, so in the research that we did, we found out that every single person wants a medal for showing up, right? It's not just millennials who like want to get a participation medal. Everybody actually wants to be recognized. We found that every single generation wants to feel relevant, like they still matter, not just boomers that are like fighting for it. We found that every generation wants to feel like they're like that people see them, right? That they're not being ignored, not just Gen Xers. And we found that Gen Zs also want to be part of doing something that matters to them and has some purpose. But by the way, every single generation wants that also. So all of these stereotypes that we've been handed about each generation, it is universal. Every, like literally like 93% and up, every single generation wants all of these things. The difference is how they recognize them, how they're manifested. And the problem is that Gen Xers and especially boomers managed by walking around, right? They managed by seeing you in the office. And it's like, if you didn't have FaceTime with your leaders, they didn't think you were working. And now FaceTime isn't FaceTime in the office. It's FaceTime on your phone, right? It's like, it's an app, right? But the term FaceTime was like, if I don't see your face and you're not working, you're not working. When I ran my executive search firm for 15 years, we were a completely remote office. Like, we had people working for us all around the world. And I started this firm in 2002. So it was like remote before it was COVID cool. We didn't have Zoom. We like barely had the internet at that point. And people were like, but Laura, how do you judge the quality of your team's work? And I'm like, are you sitting down? This is really complicated. Are you really listening? Stop multitasking. By the quality of my team's work. Like, it's not that hard. So if you are a Gen Z, if you are a millennial and you're like, I don't know how to deal with my boss who like thinks I have to be in the office, the way to do it is to actually have a conversation. Like, what does success look like in this project? Right? What are we trying to get to? What are the metrics by which we're being measured? What's the timeline? And then that's your playbook. So if they're like, by June 1st, we need to know X, Y, and Z, then you're like, okay, great. It's January 1. What do I need to tell them by May 1st, by April 1st, by March 1st, so that they never have to come find you to wonder how far you've gone. So what I would say is be proactive about giving status updates. If they're not worried about you, then they're not worried about you. Right? One of our clients was the Special Olympics, and we were talking to the Special Olympics one day, and my business partner lived in Moscow, and it was like dark outside of her window because of the time zone. And the CEO of Special Olympics is like, "Where are you?" Because it's dark, and she's like, "Oh, I'm in Moscow." And he said, "Oh, are you visiting family?" And she's like, "No, I live here." We've been working with them for 2 years at this point, and he was like, "How did I not know that?" And she said, "Because you never needed to." Right? So client focused, like, look at your boss, look at your leader and say, okay, I'm never going to teach them how to just trust that I'm working if I don't actually teach them to trust that I'm working. So the way that you do that is you over communicate to them what you're working on, where you're going, what matters to you, how you like to get feedback, and not the like, please give me a compliment sandwich kind of stuff, but just here's what I've done. I would like feedback on these 3 specific points. Like, ask for what you need, be specific, and make it easy for them. And you can actually train them, and they'll be so grateful to actually know how to get the best out of you.
Yeah. And if they were brought up, like you say, in a different environment and they were pulled up in their career with different expectations, no wonder you kind of speak different languages. And so if you want a different outcome, you've got to speak their language, or at least translate. And like you say, over communicate.
Absolutely. Because just think about it for a second. If you're like, I'm working on Slack, I'm working on Google Meet, I'm like using all of these technologies, you use those things in the office. You can take those things home. It still looks the same, but they managed by walking around and seeing you. They can't take that home. So like, they have to learn a new thing. And the only way they're going to learn is if you teach them.
Yeah. Listen, Laura, I could talk to you all day. I've absolutely loved having you on here. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. Please come back.
Yes, I would love to. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you.